right, you guys, I thought I should make a little quick video to go over some notes like what we would do in class with these last kind of minute async days. So I hope you guys are all doing well. Yesterday I had you guys look at McDonald versus Chicago and the idea of selective incorporation. So this is an important thing to know, like this is one kind of idea and it's a whole little subsection within the College Board, the course exam description. So selective incorporation, definitely write that down in your notes. I'll go through it, but what it has done is it has imposed limitations on state regulation of civil rights and liberties. So that's what it does, right? And remember, a doctrine is like, back in the day, it was like kind of like a speech or whatnot, but in this case, it's more like, the idea or the policy of it. The case that represents that is McDonald versus Chicago, which I had you guys look at yesterday, had to do with the Second Amendment and the right to keep and bear arms, even when a state perhaps will, like, for example, make limitations on that. So make sure you did yesterday's assignment. If you guys did not have a chance to go back to your packet on the Google Classroom and kind of break that down, definitely I would recommend it. So just to kind of review that, and then we'll go back to the idea of selective incorporation and tie it all together. So before this case, and again, notice how recent it was, right? It's kind of crazy town. The Second Amendment prevented the federal government from forbidding people to keep and bear arms. In 2008, gun rights activists and the National Rifle Association, which is a really effective lobbyist group, right? An interest group, to go back to that prior term, they challenged a law in the District of Columbia which effectively banned all handguns except those for law enforcement officers and other rare exceptions. So in this case called District of Columbia versus Heller, the court ruled the Second Amendment applied to the district's handgun ban violated this right. So they ruled that because the Bill of Rights was intended to restrain Congress and the federal government, not the states, this ruling only applied to the federal government and did not incorporate the Second Amendment. Okay, so that's a really key thing, is that there was this precedence of this earlier case, but Washington, D.C. is kind of a funky place. There's talk about making it a state right now, but it's not a state, right? And so any existing state laws preventing handguns were not altered by this precedent, and that is until this case of McDonald versus Chicago. So the facts of the case were that citizens in both Chicago and then the nearby suburb of Oak Park, they challenged policies in their cities that were similar to the ones struck down in Washington. So it got struck down in Washington, but again, because DC is not a state, it did not apply to the states equally. And it was a local case as well. So it wasn't like the Supreme Court hadn't ruled in that case to make it a federal law. All right, Chicago required all gun owners to register guns, yet the city invariably refused to allow citizens to register handguns, creating an effective ban. Okay, so they didn't outright ban them, but they said you have to have them registered, and we will not register them. So see how they did that? The lead plaintiff was Otis McDonald, and he pointed to the dangers of his crime-ridden neighborhood and how the city's ban had rendered him without self-defense. So he used the Second Amendment and said that should have helped prevented this vulnerability. His attorneys also attempted to take the previous decision in District of Columbia versus Heller and extended it, they attempted to take that case further by extending its holding to state governments via the 14th Amendment. So again, that Heller case was only in DC, and in this opportunity, they wanted to expand it to the states by implementing the 14th Amendment's due process clause. So this was not a landslide of a case. It was a close vote. It was a 5-4, and they ruled in favor of McDonald. And the court applied the Second Amendment to the states via the 14th Amendment's due process laws. Okay, so your 14th Amendment, your Second Amendment is just protect you from the federal government, but here they are saying, no, we're going to expand it to the states because of the 14th Amendment. Okay, so it's not always cut and dry. It can be really complicated. All right, they used Heller as a precedent, and they said the right to individual self-defense is at the heart of the Second Amendment. And the majority opinion also noted the historical context of the 14th Amendment and asserted that the 14th Amendment sought to provide a constitutional foundation for the Civil Rights Act of 1866. And then here's where we go, and we'll get into this a little more. The selective incorporation doctrine has encouraged the court to require state governments and their political subdivisions to follow most parts of the Bill of Rights. The ruling in McDonald highlighted yet another right that the states and their municipalities, or there's like the cities, right, could not deny its citizens. All right, so selective incorporation is the idea that state laws must also adhere to selective Bill of Rights provisions because of the 14th Amendment. So you could say previous to the 14th Amendment, the states could kind of have a little bit more leeway. But since the passage of the 14th Amendment, that means that they can essentially selectively incorporate the Bill of Rights into state laws because of the 14th Amendment. So I hope that makes sense. It's kind of I don't know, it's a weird, I don't know. The name selective incorporation, it doesn't make me think of that, I'll be honest. When I first heard that term, I'm like, I don't think I would have guessed that that's what it's about. So I hope that makes sense. If it's still unclear, let me know, and I'll try to break it down a different way for you as best I can. Okay, I'm going to stop that. I don't want to make these videos too long, so let me finish.